have the great joy of working with people through my monthly group coaching program called Success Circle. The entire point of Success Circle is to help them unlock and unleash new levels of leadership capacity so that they can live out the full purpose for which God intends for them to live. Now, that said, one of the topics that I am routinely asked about as part of the program is, how do you position yourself for promotion, right? Like, how do you strategically ensure that you are ready if an opportunity to advance comes your way? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Hey y'all, welcome to the Nona Jones Show. Listen, I have a hypothesis that there are so many people in this world who are living beneath their full potential because they're just waiting to be chosen. They're waiting to be selected by somebody to do something. But while that is admirable, I think it's optimal that instead of waiting to be chosen, you do the work so that when an opportunity arises, you're ready for it, right? I've been in business leadership roles since I was 23. So that's almost 18 years now. I have worked across the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, technology sector. I've held roles with global scope, leading global teams. And so what I want to do is I want to use this episode to just share some of the insights that I have gained across my professional experience that I hope will help you position yourself for promotion so that you can be all that you can be. So I'm going to just kind of share some of my experiences professionally. And one of the first questions I want to answer is, what did you think you would be when you grew up, and what changed your plan? So here's the thing. I am absolutely not doing what I thought I would be doing. From a young age, I wanted to be a physician. Specifically, I wanted to be an oncologist. My father passed away from cancer shortly before my second birthday. And so I was always just really intrigued by cancer and what it was and how it functioned in the body. So even in high school, when my classmates were taking art, PE as electives, I was taking anatomy and physiology. I was taking biology 2, chemistry 2, physics 2. I just loved science. I devoured science, especially when it had to do with life sciences, biological sciences. So I thought I was going to be an oncologist. Now, what changed my plan is I went to the University of Florida. Go Gators. Whoop, whoop. Went to the University of Florida. I was a microbiology and cell science major. And the summer between I think it was my second and third year. So that summer, right? So technically my second year going into my third year, I was doing a research project with the National Institutes of Health. And my sponsor for the project was a physician. And he was an older physician. Looking back on it in hindsight, I think he was just really jaded because he asked me once, he was like, why do you want to be a doctor? What is your motivation? And I was like, I want to be a partner in people's healthcare. I want to give them hope. And this man looked at me. He was like, that's not what we do. As doctors, we're not here to give people hope. It's about the facts. It's about the science. And I was just like, oh, well, then this isn't for me. So I changed my major to communications. But my love for science and math never changed. That never went away. I just was like, I want to give people hope. So if I can't do that through medicine, I'll do it through something else. So that's what changed my plan. Now, how I started working in corporate America is I met my husband my third year in college. We got married 1 month after I graduated. And because I had, changed my major, initially I thought I would be a journalist. That was my plan, was I was going to go into broadcast journalism and I was going to be a news anchor. Well, God intervened even in that because I had auditioned for my school's news program. We had a news hour on PBS. I auditioned to be one of the primary news anchors. And when the results of the audition were posted, I did not see my name on the list. So I just figured I wasn't selected. Well, as it turns out, I went back a couple of weeks later. The list was still posted. I went back a couple of weeks later just to look at the list, just to see. Y'all, my name was on that list. I was chosen as a primary anchor. There were 2 primary anchors. I was chosen as one of them. For whatever reason, God didn't let me see that. And I think that was truly divine intervention, because if I had saw that, I'm pretty sure I would have been placed on the broadcast news anchor track, and my life would be very different. So anyway, ended up, I got married to my husband. And by then I just wanted a job. Like I wasn't going to medical school. I wasn't going to be a news anchor. So I wanted a job. So I got a job at Nationwide Insurance. I was kind of a mid-level independent contributor. My title was Quality Assurance Analyst. It was a brand new role created from scratch. My job was to essentially do quality control reviews on the processing team in a department. I had never worked in that department, y'all. I was basically quality checking work I had never done. It was insane. But anyway, got into that role, and about a year into that role, I would check the job boards periodically, just because, the role was cool, but I felt like I had more to offer. Like I loved leadership. I loved, I didn't have the word for it then, but I do now. I loved strategy. I loved building things. I loved all that. And so I would look at the job boards just to see what was available. Now you have to understand, I live in Gainesville, Florida. Okay. Nationwide is headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. So the really big, fun, interesting roles were all based in Columbus, Ohio. But my husband, he decided that we would not be moving from Gainesville because his father's church is here in Gainesville. That's why we live here. And he knew that he would go into ministry at some point. And so even though the really fun roles were elsewhere, I had to basically look at what was available in Gainesville, which wasn't a lot. But about a year into my quality assurance analyst role, there was a job created. It was a community relations manager type of role that would sit on the regional leadership team. It would be responsible for the entire state of Florida. It would be have some philanthropic responsibilities, but it would also primarily be responsible for expanding Nationwide's footprint in what was called diverse markets. That is the African American, Hispanic, Asian markets. Okay. So making sure that the company was effectively serving the needs of these diverse populations, because there had been some sort of a lawsuit against the company, and there was this consent decree that said that Nationwide had to be much more intentional about serving these populations, because the portfolio was apparently over-indexed in the Caucasian population. So anyway, this job was created. It was a leadership role. Now, I saw the job. I read the job description. I was like, oh my gosh, I could do that. But one of the qualifications said that you had to have 10 years of progressively responsible management experience. Y'all, I was 1 year out of college. I didn't have no progressively responsible management experience. I had managed volunteers, technically, I guess, through some leadership roles in college and high school, but I hadn't managed a team, and I certainly didn't have progressively responsible experience. So, I saw that it required 15 years of leadership. It required all this experience. It was all this experience. Now, I understand why, because it was literally a leadership role that sat on the leadership team. So it was like an executive level role. But I saw it and I was just like, I think I can do that job. So I prayed and I asked God to give me wisdom to kind of position myself the best. I didn't know who else would be applying for it, but I was like, Lord, help me position myself the best. And God gave me an idea to basically put together, a PowerPoint illustrating how I would tackle the responsibilities of the role, what my plan would be. I put the PowerPoint together. I had a local printer print it in color and bind it in a portfolio. And I had them make 2 copies. I gave 1 copy, or I put 1 copy on the chair of the hiring vice president at the end of the workday. So he was already gone. I put another copy on the chair of the director of human resources. So he was already gone too. Well, the next morning, I got to work and I got a call from the HR director. And he said that the hiring vice president wanted to meet with me. Now, when he said it, it's like I had a moment where I was like, oh, wait a minute. I went in this man's office after hours. He's probably going to fire me. I had that thought. But instead, I went down, met with him. The HR director was in the room. He asked me some questions about the portfolio. He said he was like really impressed with what I put together, asked me some questions. And then I think a few days later, he told me that there would be another conversation with another vice president who was coming down from the home office. I did not know I was being interviewed, y'all. I just thought I was meeting with people. But I had this second conversation with this hiring vice president. After that conversation, the HR director offered me the job. And I was, of course, elated, but it's like reality settled on me when he gave me that news, because I was like, oh, wait, now I have to do the job, you know? And so that was a wonderful opportunity for me, because what happened was being placed on this regional leadership team, I was in these really high level leadership meetings, and y'all, they would have conversations that I just didn't understand. They were talking in acronyms. We would read, P&L statements, and there was all these reports with all these columns and percentages and acronyms, and I didn't know what none of it meant. And I remember about a month or so into the role, I was completely overwhelmed because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand the conversations that they were having, because again, my role was, it was community relations and diverse markets acquisition strategy. But I'm sitting at the table with like the vice president of sales and the vice president of underwriting and the vice president of property claims and the vice president of finance, and all these people who are like, they've been at this for like decades, right? And so what I did is I found a woman who would periodically come into the meetings. She reported to one of the vice presidents. She had been in a director role for many, many years, was extremely knowledgeable. And I asked her if she would mind if I met with her. And I went to her office and I sat down and I admitted that I didn't know what was going on. And I told her that I just felt like an imposter, because I was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't understand these reports. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. And she basically assured me, she was like, well, Nona, if you're at the table, it's because you deserve to be there. But she gave me the best advice I think anyone has ever given me. She said, Nona, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to commit to read everything. She said, read everything, make notes of what you don't understand. She said, but books are going to have to become your best friend. She said, there's so much information available out there, but you have to be disciplined in how to find it. So she said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Barnes & Noble. I want you to pick up just a couple of books on business and leadership, read those books, and then after you read them, come back, let's meet, let's talk about what you learned, and then I'll review the reports with you and I'll talk about what all the acronyms mean. Y'all, that was a game changer for me. I went to Barnes & Noble. I picked up probably 5 or 6 books because I've always loved reading. I've always loved knowledge, but I had never been in the business section I had no reason to go in the business section, right? So I picked up these business books. I picked up books on marketing. I picked up a book called What the CEO Wants You to Know. I picked up a book called Executive Intelligence. I picked up a book just called Execution, just really good books. I picked up a book called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, all these books. And it opened my mind to what was possible. So anyway, I read these books, set a meeting with her to review what I had learned. I was brimming over with excitement. She reviewed the reports with me, explained all the acronyms. I disciplined myself that when the meeting materials were sent out for the meeting, instead of getting in the meeting and expecting everything to be reviewed, then I read everything before the meeting, printed it out, made notes on it, things I didn't understand, questions I needed to ask. And I would say within probably a month and a half to 2 months, I was at a level of functional understanding. I understood what we were talking about. I understood how the numbers related to each other. I understood what the reports were. I started to even read on our broader corporate strategy. What is it that we were trying to do? What were the components of the corporate strategy? How did my work fit into the corporate strategy? It was a baptism by fire. Now, I had a very interesting kind of fork in the road moment while I was working for Nationwide, because in the property and casualty insurance industry, there is a designation that is essentially considered almost like a PhD in property and casualty insurance. It's called the Chartered Property and Casualty Underwriter Designation. It's a CPCU. And it takes years for people to get this designation. Well, I came to a fork in the road because I was thinking about getting the CPCU designation, and that would have taken years. But then I met someone who had their Master of Business Administration, and I thought about it. I was like, I think I'll be here at this company for the rest of my career, but maybe I won't. And I don't want to spend years getting a designation that's going to pigeonhole me in one sector. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to get my MBA. And so I applied to the University of Florida Master of Business Administration program. I got accepted and I got an MBA. And that's what happened while I was at Nationwide. And so my biggest lesson from my time at Nationwide is read everything. And I'm going to give you these lessons as I talk about each role that I've held. Read everything. All right. Be the most informed person in the room next to the person who's presenting the information. One of the best ways to separate yourselves from people is to just read the materials. It's mind-boggling to me how many people show up to meetings who haven't read the pre-reads. They haven't read the agenda. They don't know what's happening. They have no questions to ask. A lot of times I'll be in meetings and people are just not even there. Like, they're on their phone, maybe they're doing emails. And I'm like, why are you even here? So what happens is the decisions get made by the people who are informed. That's how you position yourself for promotion. Be informed. Become a decision maker. Become the person that people look to because you have the context and you have the understanding. Read everything. All right, second role. I got recruited by a utility company about maybe 2 years into that leadership role at Nationwide. I got recruited to a utility company into a senior executive role where I was leading, at the time, I was leading like community engagement work. I was leading corporate philanthropy, things like that. But about maybe, 8 months into that role, the person who was the senior executive leading all of our state and federal legislative and regulatory affairs work, they announced that they were retiring. And, I've always been the kind of person that I love a challenge. Like, once I understand something and it's on steady state, I get bored immediately. And so, the work that I was doing, the community engagement work was fine. My team was doing programs, serving the community, scholarships, all these things. That was cool. But I wasn't really being challenged. And so, when he was gearing up for retirement, I was like, man, I want to learn more about environmental policy and, the regulatory side of things because it was just foreign to me. And so I started to meet with him and just learn more about his world and what he was working on. And unbeknownst to me, he met with the CEO and he said, instead of hiring somebody to do this work, I think Nona can do it. Like, she's really inquisitive. She's smart. She's connecting the dots. And so what we did is we set up like a bit of a transition plan where I started to get connected to the different organizations and boards that he was representing the utility on. And I started to learn more about the work that they were doing. And y'all, it was awesome because I learned about state level policy as it relates to, electricity regulation, water, wastewater, telecommunications, all these super complex systems. I started to learn more about the policy side, governing them at the state level and the federal level. I started to get involved at the federal level, with the Environmental Protection Agency. I started to learn more about, carbon credits and just greenhouse gases and all this stuff I knew nothing about, y'all. But I loved it. I loved it because I learned so much in that role. As a matter of fact, I was awarded the American Public Power Association's Robert F. Roundtree Rising Star Award, which is the highest recognition given to a utility executive under the age of 40. And I think at the time I might have been 26, 27, maybe. And so that was awesome. I would say the lesson that I learned from that as it relates to positioning yourself for promotion is take on new and difficult assignments because they will grow you. You will never grow when you stay in your comfort zone. Like, you will never grow when you're just comfortable with what you're doing, when it's kind of routinized. You need to pursue the hard things. I was willing to learn a new discipline. I was willing to learn a new side of the work. And because of that, it expanded my scope. So instead of, being the community relations director, I became the public policy director, and community relations was a function of my work. But then I also took on environmental and regulatory and state and federal affairs. And so that became just a training ground for me to learn more about the utility industry, to learn more about how it was governed, and, learn more about the different companies in the landscape, because utilities are heavily regulated. And so I had to learn what the different competitive advantages and disadvantages were between our utility and other utilities, because I was also involved with our local policy. And so there was conversations about, potentially either selling the utility or going with another utility provider. Like I was in those conversations. And so I just learned so much. And so if you want to position yourself for promotion, you really have to be willing to do the difficult things, stretch yourself, learn more about sides of the business that you don't know anything about, So let's say, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say that you work in human resources. Well, learn more about finance. Learn more about supply chain, learn more about operations. How do they do what they do? How does your role fit into the bigger strategy of the company? Take on new and difficult assignments. So after that, I got recruited to another senior leadership role. This was now at the C-suite level. I got promoted to a new leadership role at a nonprofit organization that at the time was statewide in Florida. All right. And so I was recruited into this role. It was brand new. And the functions within the purview of my team were marketing and brand. I think it was resource development. So all the fundraising, public and private, programmatic expansion, because we had aspirations to expand beyond the state of Florida, as well as policy and government affairs. So state level government affairs. At the time, we did not have any federal presence. All right. And so when I stepped into the role, one of the first things that I did is, of course, I tried to understand the lay of the land when it came to our state level government affairs work, because the organization at the time was funded maybe 80% by public funding. All right. Well, since resource development was part of my purview, I knew that we had to diversify. We absolutely had to diversify, because public funding is highly restrictive. And so where we wanted to innovate, we wanted to try new things, we couldn't do that with the public funding. We could only do it with private funding. So the organization was about 80% public funded, 20% private funded. But the problem was the 20% of the private funding came at the local level. So you have to understand, it's a statewide nonprofit that has local affiliates. All right. It was the local affiliates that had the private funding. The statewide organization didn't. And so I needed to build up a private funding infrastructure as well, which is like a mixture of corporations, foundations, major donors. We had to build that whole infrastructure out with no money, by the way. But then I also thought that it made sense strategically to build out a federal government affairs strategy, because if we were going to expand nationally, the work that we were doing was absolutely a public service. And so it felt like there was a kind of an alignment with the federal government, because I knew that if we could get some federal funding, that would accelerate our ability to expand the program nationally. And so what I did there is I started to build some inroads. I worked with a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., was able to carve out some funding in our budget to retain a lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. They were very gracious. They got me in front of some really key members of Congress, high-level administration officials. This was in the Obama administration. And I just set about building the name recognition of the organization in D.C. and just wanted people to know who we were, what we did, got us involved with some coalitions and organizations that were aligned with our mission, again, to just build the name recognition of the organization. And then we were able to bring a family up to DC and have them actually testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee and kind of share their story and the work that our organization did. And that was just incredible, because after that happened, there was some money allocated to a new grant to support organizations that had our mission. So here's the thing. There are no more earmarks. Like, you can no longer carve out funding for a specific organization, but you can allocate funding to grants that you can make publicly available that people can apply for. And that grant was like tailor-made for our organization. And so we did that, which was awesome. Now, I say this because the learning that I had in that role was not so much about the work I was doing as it was about the way that I treated my team. So, I was so focused on building out this, federal legislative strategy. And there was a person on my team who was leading our statewide legislative strategy. She was brilliant, just awesome. And in many ways, I kind of neglected her. She lived in our state capital in Florida, and I didn't get up there to see her very often. And then when I was doing our federal legislative work, like doing the visits and things, I kind of did that on my own. I didn't really invite her to be a part of that. And being fully honest and transparent, the reason was because I wanted to make a name for myself. I wanted to be the one who built the federal relationships. I wanted to be the one who secured the money because I wanted to prove my value. I wanted to prove that I could make a contribution by myself. And what ended up happening is she ended up resigning. And she resigned because she said that she felt like I didn't want her there. Y'all, that thing broke my heart, because the truth is, she was the best member of my team. Part of the reason why I didn't spend a lot of time with her in the state capitol is because I thought she had it all figured out. I felt like she was the strongest person on my team, but my behavior communicated to her that I didn't want her on the team. My behavior, kind of leaving her out, communicated to her that I didn't care about her. And so I would say that the learning that I had in that role, again, is not so much about the work as it is about caring for your people. Because as you grow in scope and responsibility, you will be given the privilege of leading people. You will be given the privilege of serving people as leader. And I think many times people aspire to leadership because they just want to be in control, when the reality is, when you become a leader, you simply become the chief servant. At least that's how I look at it, because I try to model myself after the example of Jesus. And he was like, look, if you want to be the greatest servant. So where I went off course with her, though, is instead of serving her, I served my ego. I wanted to be seen as a mover and a shaker. I wanted to be seen as indispensable. And as a result, I ended up kind of pushing her to the margins. And so as you grow into new roles, I would say care for your people, crucify ego. All right. The next role after that, I got recruited to Facebook as the head of Global Faith Partnerships. Now, I believe I kind of shared how that happened in a previous episode, but just as a quick recap, God told me to resign from the job at the nonprofit. I loved what I was doing, but I know the voice of God, so I did. I resigned. He gave me the exact date to resign on, and I did. 25 minutes after I resigned, I got a call from Facebook inviting me to essentially join the team, join the company as the head of Faith Partnerships. Now, that, of course, was a total God thing. Even when people say to me, how do you get a job at Facebook? I'm like, I don't know, pray about it, see if God says it's going to happen. But there were so many things I learned at Facebook. And I will share, one of them is this: always have a hypothesis. Okay. If you want your company or your team or your leader to get behind your idea, you need to have a hypothesis for why you believe that your approach is the right approach and what the evidence of success will be. What I have seen happen throughout my career is people will have these grandiose ideas, like something they want to do, something they think needs to happen. But they themselves are not clear on why they think that approach is the right approach and what will happen as a result of investing in their approach. Like, how will I know this was a success or not? Well, at Facebook, every new project we undertook, every investment we undertook, there was a guiding hypothesis behind it. There was an educated guess for why this was the right decision to make. And the reason why that mattered is because depending on the outcome of the investment, depending on the outcome of the project, we would know that the hypothesis was either right or wrong. And so having the hypothesis really matters. And another thing I learned while at Facebook that I think is really important is this idea that done is better than perfect. Because you can spend so much time trying to get something to a level of perfection that you miss the moment that is optimal to just act. All right. Like, let's just throw something out there that's minimally viable. You know, it's not trash, but it's minimally viable. We know that it's going to solve some sort of pain point. It's going to solve some sort of need that our customer or our user has. And let's just see how they respond to it. And depending on how they respond, we can iterate, we can tweak, we can change, but don't wait on something to be perfect, because if you wait for it to be perfect, you may very well miss the moment in which it actually meets a need at all. Okay. And so if you're trying to position yourself for promotion, remember, done is better than perfect. Get whatever you're working on to a state of minimally viable, throw it out there, and then make tweaks along the way. Another lesson I learned at Facebook that has been invaluable to me, and I would say that it has absolutely changed the way that I show up as a leader, is this philosophy that if it isn't working, shut it down. If it isn't working, just shut it down. If you have a hypothesis and you're testing the hypothesis and you're not getting the results, you can try to tweak it maybe once or twice, but if it's still not working, shut it down. There were times at Facebook when we would shut down projects that we had poured millions of dollars into because it didn't hit the benchmark of success that we established before we undertook the project. And that's why it's important to have that hypothesis, because you can decide, oh, wait a minute, this isn't working because we're not getting the results that we expected to get. So we're going to shut it down. When I was in business school, one of the concepts I learned about that was super powerful and transformative for me is this concept of a sunk cost. What a sunk cost is it's a cost that you can never get back. Okay. And so, for example, let's talk about in the context of relationships. There are so many people who stay in relationships and they justify it by saying, well, I've already given 20 years of my life to this thing. But those are 20 years that you can never get back. And so you should never base a future decision on your previous investment because you can never get it back. Base your future decision on what's the right decision in this moment. All right. So at Facebook, if something wasn't working, it didn't matter if we invested $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, 15. We weren't investing another dollar if it wasn't working. Those are sunk costs. We can never get it back. So yes, positioning yourself for promotion. What I learned is always have a hypothesis so you have a track record that you can point to say, look, I said that we would do this. We were successful. Or maybe I iterated. I learned from what wasn't successful and I made it successful. And just shut stuff down if it isn't working. Okay. My most recent leadership role was as Chief Content and Partnerships Officer at YouVersion. And I was on that team for about a year. God specifically called me to step off of the day-to-day work of the team. And so now I'm serving as global ambassador for YouVersion. So I get to represent the organization globally as well as, externally in the things that I do. But I joined that team because I really wanted to bring everything I had learned at Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, to ministry, to kingdom. And I could not think of a better place to do that at than YouVersion, which is the maker of the Bible app. I would say that in my year on the team, one of the most powerful lessons that I learned was meet people where they are and help them grow to where you need them to be. And the reason why I say that's a powerful lesson that I learned at that time is, you know, YouVersion is a ministry. It's a ministry, a digital ministry of Life Church. And so because it is a ministry and because it is a church, there's a very different ethos on the team, right? Like you don't just fire somebody because they're not performing. You have high expectations, but if they're not performing, you kind of try to figure out why, and you try to figure out how you can help them grow into their potential if they have potential. I think what I learned on that team and in my role was, you know, in previous jobs, if somebody wasn't performing, I would just be like, hey, too bad, so sad, I'm hiring somebody else. But I think on that team, I really learned that there is virtue in helping somebody unlock new levels of potential within them, you know, being able to see somebody is capable of more and help them grow into the more that they're capable of, you know? And so I think as a leader, that was one of the most important things that I gleaned during my time on the YouVersion team, is just be willing to help people grow. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to become a crutch, and that doesn't mean that you need to become an enabler of poor performance. What that means is if you see that somebody has the potential, do what you can to help them unlock it. All right. That's how you grow as a leader. So last question, what am I doing now? And what am I learning about myself? So right now I am full-time Nona. What that means is I'm full-time in ministry. I am traveling all over the world, speaking. I'm, writing books, about to release a new book this year called The Gift of Rejection. I hope that you pick it up, but about to release that. And supporting my husband as he serves as senior pastor of our church. I get to support our church community. I also am a full-time entrepreneur. So I have, as I mentioned at the very top of this episode, I have a monthly group coaching program called Success Circle, where I meet with people on a monthly basis to just help give them some different thoughts and insights and practical tips on how to unleash their potential. I love that. So I get to do that. And if you want to be a part of Success Circle, just go to nonajones.com. You can sign up there. But I'm doing that. I think what I'm learning about myself is, for all of my career, I have been within an organization. I've worked on a team. I have lived under the so-called brand of an organization. And I think what I'm learning about myself now, which I did not know was even possible before I stepped out into what God said, is I think that everything I've done in all these organizations, everything I've learned in all of these organizations was literally for this moment. Like, it was for this moment. Every organization I've served in, every leadership role I've held, it's really been a paid internship for what I get to do now. So the team that I lead in my personal life, I'm trying to pour into them the way that I've learned to do across my different failures as a leader in other organizations. The strategies that I'm building and employing, they're the same strategies that I built for other organizations and scaled globally. So these are things that I get to do now as myself. And so I am learning that, I've had a lot of really cool paid internships. I want to end with this. The Bible says in Ecclesiastes 9:10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the realm of the dead, where you are going, there is neither working, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom. What that means is don't slack. Don't slack off because you're not yet where you think you want to be. Don't think, well, once I become a vice president, then I'll really work hard. No, build your work ethic now. If you're an independent contributor, if you're an individual contributor, build your work ethic now, because that work ethic will carry you as you ascend up the ladder of whatever it is that you're trying to do. Just whatever your hand finds to do it to the absolute best of your ability and invest in your skill development. Become better. You should be a better professional, a better leader, a better preacher, a better minister tomorrow than you were today, because you should constantly grow and learn. So if this episode helped you, and if you want to go deeper with me, I do want to formally invite you to join my Success Circle monthly group coaching program. It is $50 a month. We meet every first Wednesday at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. I do a teaching, but we have a lot of interactivity. There are pre-reads, there's homework, there's handouts. We also have an exclusive Facebook community where we will interact there as well. But the entire mission of Success Circle is to build a community where people like you who have, I believe, unending levels of potential can be equipped to do exactly what God created you to do. Because I believe you were made on purpose with purpose. And I would love to help you discover that purpose and unleash it in the world. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope this was helpful for you. And I just appreciate you for watching. So take care.